There are thousands, I mean literally thousands of tutorials on making a clock or some kind of timer thing in JavaScript. So a thought popped in my head, what could be the worst possible way to make a clock in JavaScript? First, I needed a plan, and ever since I was a little kid, I've always been mesmerized by mechanical things like clocks, gears, pulleys, that kind of things. So my idea for this clock is to make a pendulum mechanical clock in JavaScript. To do this, first I would need some kind of physics engine for the gears and the pendulum. And after doing a little bit of searching through the many JavaScript libraries, I found two that seemed to be the most popular. They were Plank and Matter.js. Matter.js is definitely the more popular one, and it was a little bit easier for me to set up, so I chose that one. But you'll soon see that I ran into some big problems with Matter.js, so just keep watching if you want to see that. To start building this clock, I set up some goals. First, I wanted the clock to keep time, of course. And second, I wanted them to have actual gears. And I know this sounds kind of confusing, but there's some physics engines that have these special gear joints where it kind of looks like a gear, but it doesn't actually have a collider on it. So I wanted it to actually be an actual gear. And then the third requirement is to complete it in 5 days. Now just note that I wasn't working on it the whole day out of these 5 days. Instead, I was just working on it about 2 hours in the afternoon. So in total, about 8 hours for this project. To start, I really wanted to create a function that I could easily create gears with. And I know there's probably many ways of doing this, but I really didn't know where to start on this. So after reading the Matter.js docs, I found that you could create a shape from an array of vectors. So if I could create a function that creates this gear vectors, then I could make a gear from that. But just thinking about how to generate this array of vectors really made my brain hurt. I'm sure for some people it would have been super easy, but for me it felt impossible. So I turned to AI. I asked ChatGPT to generate a function that used from vertices method from Matter.js, and to make a function that took teeth count and radius as arguments. ChatGPT did its thing, and when I tested it, I got this. Now, I immediately blamed AI for this, but after a while of debugging, I found a message in the console that said that I needed to add some kind of poly decomp library, and it turns out that physics engines often don't have the ability to render convex holes, which are basically like where the points come inside of the shape. It was kind of confusing, but all I needed to do was install an extra library and add it to Matter.js. And once I got that working, I expected to see a beautiful gear, but instead I got this, and this, and this. And after a long back and forth between ChatGPT, I gave up. At this point, I already spent so much time on this function that I decided that I should just try to make the gears a different way. At this point in the video, if you like this type of content and want to see more of it, please subscribe. Anyways, back to the video. Now I did research, and this is something I really should have done from the beginning, but I didn't. And I wound up coming across an article that talked about making gears with JavaScript. And the solution was so simple, I felt really dumb for not thinking of this. It was simply to create a tooth shape and then just position the tooth on the circumference based on how many teeth there was. Get it? To do this, I needed to make a few things. First, I needed to make a tooth profile shape, which is basically just an array of vectors. And then the second thing I needed to make was a function that takes an angle and the radius as an argument, and then it returns this vector position on the circumference of a circle. Number one was pretty easy to do by myself. Number two was better for ChatGPT, and it handled it perfectly this time. It turns out that it's better at doing math than drawing gears. And after all this work, I got this. I was super happy, but it all quickly faded. I still could not get the gear to collide with things. I tried all kinds of things to try to fix this, and at this point I was super frustrated, and I almost gave up this project. But instead of doing that, I did more research into the other physics libraries, and I wound up switching to Plank. And this basically means that I had to trash all of my code and start from scratch. Initially, I tried to do things just like in Matter.js, so I tried to use a weld joint, and that didn't work. It turns out you can actually create several fixtures on the same body, so after I changed my code a little bit, I got this. At this point, I was super excited. I really needed to move quickly though because I only had about 2 hours left. So after creating the rest of my gears and putting some joints on them, I got this. These gears have a 1 to 30 ratio, or that means that the escapement will spin about 30 times for the second hand to go around once. And at this point, I just reminded myself that I need an escapement. I searched through so many clock plans, and they all seemed extremely complicated or required very special parts to make them, but I finally wind up coming across this simple Lego clock. This clock had the simplest escapement I have ever seen, so I quickly implemented it and I got this. And if you're confused, the escapement is connected to the gears with a joint, so I just moved it out of the way so you could see it a little better. At this point, the only thing left was to create the pendulum the right length. And there's a special formula to do this, but instead of that, I just used trial and error. And I got it actually pretty accurate pretty quickly. I also added a little timer to show the time, the accurate time, and the clock time. And I called it done. All in all, I think this project turned out pretty cool and neat. But there's so many things that I wish and I wanted to add to this in the future. I really hope that you like this video and you learned something from it, and I'll see you in the next one.